This is the complete step-by-step guide on how to build a fire gaming PC using the brand new Lian Li LANCOOL 217 Infinity that drops today at just under $130 and just $5 more than the standard LANCOOL 217. Now, Lian Li took their signature Infinity mirror design from their most popular SL Infinity fans and added it to the front of the LANCOOL 217, which looks incredible. The 217 Infinity will come in both black or white and come with two pre-installed 170mm fans and one 140mm fan in the rear, which all feature the Infinity mirror design in the center, which I'm glad they added for both style and value. Just like the standard LANCOOL 217, you can add up to a 360mm AIO on the top and three 120mm fans on the bottom for extra cooling. There's support for back connect motherboards, EATX, and even fit a large workstation motherboard. One of my favorite features of this case is the built-in wireless receiver that allows you to sync up with Lian Li's wireless ecosystem to control RGB and fan curves using the L-Connect software. Now, this tutorial is crazy long, but I'll have timestamps so you can feel free to skip ahead or come back whenever you're lost. All the components will be listed down below, along with affiliate links that help and support the Firewolf Tech channel. But just the time that you spend watching my videos, commenting, and hopefully subscribing is more than enough to support my channel, so thank you. So starting off with the components I'll be using. For the CPU, I'm going with the Ryzen 9 9950X3D and pairing it up with the ROG ASTRAL 5080 GPU in white. For the motherboard, I'm going with the ROG STRIX B850-A, and cooling CPU is the new Lian Li Hydroshift 2 LCD-S, which now comes with a larger 3.4-inch display. For RAM, I went with 32 gigs of the G.Skill Trident Z5 Royal Neo, and then a 2TB Samsung 9100 Pro for the SSD. For extra cooling, I went with the wireless SL Infinity fans on the bottom and the top, and also added the Lian Li Streamer cables for that extra flare. So with all the components out of the way, first thing we're setting up is the motherboard. All right, in this step, we'll be setting up our motherboard. The motherboard that I'm going for is the ROG Strix B850-A. We'll be installing our CPU, our NVMe SSD, and our RAM. Starting off with the CPU, go ahead and drop this latch down to the right, pull this latch all the way up, and lift this cover up, revealing the socket pins. Next thing, go ahead and grab your CPU. Be very careful when opening up your CPU. I recommend doing this away from the motherboard just in case you accidentally drop it. Go ahead and locate that triangle on the top left, which matches up with this triangle on the top left as well. Then go ahead and carefully place the CPU down. Give it a little nudge, drop this down, place a hand on the motherboard, drop this latch down. It's going to be resistance, but go ahead and push through. Then you can lift this cover out of the way. I recommend saving it just in case. Next thing we're installing is going to be our RAM, which I'll be going for the Trident Z5 Royal Neo RGB, which is an absolutely beautiful RAM that's going to go really well with this white motherboard, which is going to go in this section over here. If you're just going to be using two RAM sticks like I am, make sure you populate only the second and fourth DIMM slots, which are labeled A2 and B2. If you're going to be using 4, of course, populate all of them. If it's just 1, make sure it's just a second slot. Since I'll be using 2, the next thing you want to do is drop these latches down on top. So I'm going to drop down the second one, and I'm going to drop down the fourth one. Now, your motherboard may have additional latches, so just keep in mind you may have to also bring it down. On this motherboard, the only latches are on top. As always, make sure you line up the notches. If this does not line up, when I flip it over, you can see now it matches up. So this is the correct orientation. So I like to go ahead and slide that over. Keep in mind that since the latch is only on top, the RAM is going to be lifted, push it down gently, and that's going to be leveled. And then 2 clicks, 1 and 2. And you're going to repeat the same step. Second one, line up the line, make sure it's the correct orientation, slide it over, push it down slightly, 2 clicks, 1, 2. Next thing we're installing is our NVMe SSD, and the one I'm going to go for is going to be the Samsung 9100 Pro, which is a Gen 5 SSD. Also, make sure to check to see if your SSD is a single-sided like this one is, because if it is, your motherboard may have additional pieces such as an M.2 rubber for those single-sided NVMEs. Since I only have one NVMe, the primary slot is going to be this one right over here. All I have to do on this motherboard is slide this to the right, and then this whole heatsink removes, making it very easy and convenient and toolless, which I absolutely love. Next, you want to remove this sticker piece, which is going to reveal the thermal pad. And because we have this single-sided NVMe, we're going to utilize these M.2 rubber pieces, and that's going to go directly on each of these circles over here. There's a total of 2, and you'll notice that this looks just like a Lego piece, so you literally just put that right in. That's 1, that's 2. Next, go ahead and grab your NVMe, locate this notch over here, and that's going to line up to this notch right over there. So once you're ready, go ahead and angle your SSD and push it right in. Once you push that right in, all we have to do next is just push this all the way down, and that locks into place. For any additional NVMEs, we have additional ones right over here. You do have to remove the screws manually to reveal the additional sockets, but we just have one, so it's very simple and easy. Next, go ahead and grab your heatsink here, flip it over, make sure you remove the sticker, revealing the thermal pad. Then all we have to do is line it up again, put this in a slight angle, push this down, and then you can bring this latch back to the original place, and that's it. Now our motherboard is fully prepped, so go ahead and leave this to the side. And now we're ready to prep up our case. Now we're ready to prep up the Lian Li 217 Infinity case. And as the name suggests, we have the infinity mirrors right in the front. It's very, very reflective here. But the first thing I want to do here to prep up our case is to remove all of the panels to make it very easy for us to install all of our components. Starting off with this large side glass panel, there is an indent over here. You just pull the glass towards you, and this whole piece comes right off. Next thing to remove is this bottom panel over here. There is a thumb screw right over here. You can literally just unscrew it, or you can use a screwdriver if it's a little bit too hard for you to unscrew. Slide it to the left, and this whole piece comes right off. Next thing here, I'm going to rotate the case right over here, and the next thing we're going to remove is the top panel, which all we have to do is just lift this tab all the way up, and this whole top piece comes right out. And finally, the back panel, same thing here. We have a indent over here. We just pull this whole panel towards us, and that comes right off. All right, now that we have the back panel out of the way, you're gonna notice these trays over here. This is where you can attach additional hard drives. It's already fixed to the actual case. If you want to remove the bottom hard drive trays, there are thumb screws right on the bottom that are holding these two in place. So if you want to have maximum space and you know that you're not going to be using any type of hard drives at all, then I recommend just removing it, because you will get a ton of space to store everything that you want to store. So I'm going to unscrew this real quick. This one was really tight. I'm going to take a screwdriver. There you go. And to remove these, just lift this tab on the bottom, and you should be able to slide it forward, and this whole compartment comes right out. And just to show you exactly what's really going on, you just again lift this tab up, and then you're basically sliding it so that this whole piece comes right out. Again, completely optional, but I never use hard drives, so I personally like to have a whole ton of space to work with, and you also are able to add anything you want in this compartment as well, so I think that's pretty cool. So now that we have everything prepped up, the next thing here is to lay our case completely flat down, just like this, so that way we can install the motherboard. All right, now you're ready to install our motherboard. And one great thing about this case is that not only does it support your mini ITX, MATX, and of course your standard ATX motherboards, but it also supports EATX motherboards and even the enterprise extremely large motherboards by reconfiguring some of these sections to accommodate that larger motherboard, giving you endless options. But I think most of you guys are gonna go for the standard ATX motherboard, which again, the ROG STRIX BA50 is your standard ATX. So I always like to use my opposite hand in this IO opening here, so I can easily guide my motherboard here. It's a ton of space, so I can line up all of the screw holes. Keep in mind that the rear fan that's automatically attached is going to make it a little bit more difficult, but make sure you find the middle standoff, which is going to hold it in place. You'll notice that once I try to move this up and down, it is pretty much stuck in place. And whenever you open up your Lian Li case, you're going to notice this brown box, and inside they're going to include your accessory toolkit. And I absolutely love the fact that Lian Li gives you this clear compartment style storage solution, and they give you all these little tabs so you can take your time and separating all of the screws, which I think makes it very convenient. So Lian Li, if you're seeing this, definitely continue sending these compartment trays, because they make it very easy to organize and store in the future. So now that we have our motherboard on top, we want to of course locate our motherboard screws, and they're going to look just like this. They have like a rounded circle, and we're going to locate a total of 9 for our ATX motherboard. Once you have your 9 motherboard screws, go ahead and screw them all in. All right, now that we have our motherboard installed, go ahead and lift up your case. All right, now that our motherboard is fully installed, the next step here is to connect our PC panel connectors here, since we have a whole ton of open space. So let's go ahead and rotate the case all around. And now we're at the back, and what I love about the Lian Li 217 cases is that you'll notice that there's a lot of ways to route your cables, making cable management very clean and almost effortless. They go a step further by including Velcro straps in a lot of these raceways, which I personally prefer over zip ties. So on the left side over here is where all of our panel connectors are. You're going to notice a fan hub here, and these connect the pre-installed fans that are included inside this case. And this hub also has additional connectors here that we're also going to connect. And this cable over here is going to be for your PSU. So I'll show you exactly how that gets installed. For now, we're going to work on the panel connectors. So go ahead and start loosening up this top right cable and these cables over here as well. So the first connector we're going to start off with is our front panel connector, and this controls a power switch that's located right on top of the case. And so for this cable, it's going to be located right over here, so you can actually feed this cable right here. There's an opening right on the bottom, and you can go ahead and pull that cable through, and I'll show you exactly how that gets connected. The next connector is going to be this really thick one here, and this controls the USB-A on top of the case. And generally on motherboards, they're going to be located right over here. Your motherboard may also have this USB-A position on the bottom, or you might even have multiple USB-A ports in two separate locations, and that way you can choose exactly where you want. On this particular motherboard, the USB-A is going to be located right over here. And so I'm going to position this one right over here in this little opening. I can pass that through. The next connector is going to be your USB-C. If your motherboard supports it, which most modern motherboards do, then that is normally located again towards the middle of the motherboard. If you don't have a motherboard that has USB-C capabilities, then you can completely ignore this cable. But I'm going to go ahead and pass this cable in this grommet section over here. The last panel connector is going to be our HD audio, and that's going to be located right over here on the bottom right. And so you want to pass this cable all the way right on the bottom, right over here. All right, so since our panel connectors are in the front, let's go ahead and rotate the case real quick, and I'll tackle the other ones. All right, so the first connector I'm working with is going to be our USB-C connector, and that's going to be this connector over here. Reference your motherboard's layout that you can find in the user manual, so that way you know exactly where each of these connectors actually go in case it's difficult, but it looks just like this. And you want to just connect it. It only goes one way. Go ahead and connect that, and I'm going to tuck the cables inside the grommet. Next thing is going to be our USB-A. And that's going to go right over here. And all we have to do is match the notch. I'm going to bend this cable here. I'm going to position this a little bit higher. Bend this over. I'm going to push that right in. All right, so now we have USB-C and USB-A connected. All right, and next cable is going to be our front panel, which is this one right over here. And that's going to go on the bottom right. And so the front panel connector has 9 pins. Make sure you match the missing pin. Go ahead and push that in. Now we have front panel connected. And the last panel connector is going to be our HD audio. Same thing, we have 9 pins with 1 missing in a different location. So just make sure you match that, and that's going to be on the bottom left. All right, we're going to pull that right in. All right, so now that we have our panel cables connected, let's go ahead and rotate the case again. Because now I want to go ahead and talk about this little fan hub that we have right on top over here. So this fan hub, like I said earlier, controls 2 front fans as well as the rear fan. And the connectors for the hub is going to be located right over here. And you can lift this tab up so that way you can pull these cables outward. And so the fan hub is actually powered by a SATA power, which we are going to connect later on. So this is the only cable that we're not going to connect yet. However, the other 2 connectors are going to be a 4-pin PWM, which controls the fan speeds and curves. And we have a 5-volt addressable RGB, which controls the RGB as well. Now you do have the ability to also control these fans via the L-Connect software, which is very convenient, but we're going to connect this just in case you want to have a manual control at any time. And so normally most motherboards will have a lot of fan headers on the bottom of the motherboard, and they'll usually have adjustable RGB on the bottom as well. They're also scattered around your motherboard as well, so you can really position this cable anywhere. It's just easier to just route this cable from the bottom. So I'm going to go ahead and push these cables up on the bottom channel. I'm going to pull it through real quick, and we're going to connect that. For now, this SATA power, we're just going to tuck it in a corner, and we'll connect that later on. We just don't need that just yet. And we're going to rotate the case again. All right, so first thing we're going to start off with is going to be our 4-pin PWM, which is this connector over here. And on your motherboard, you're going to locate any of your fan headers. And so on this motherboard, we have a total of 1, 2, 3, and 4 fan headers on the bottom of the motherboard alongside other ones in the top. And then you also want to locate where your adjustable RGBs are on your motherboard. And this motherboard, our adjustable RGBs is right over here. And we have a total of 2 right on the bottom. And so since this fan header is closest to this 5-volt adjustable RGB, I'm just simply going to connect in this section over here, but you can literally connect each of these separately if you wanted to. This cable can be separated further away in case you have these headers positioned in a different place. So starting off with the 4-pin, we're going to position that right here. Okay, so that's going to be connected right here. And finally, the 5-volt adjustable RGB. So we want to make sure we line up the pins. All right, then we're going to tuck these cables inside. All right, guys, and to give you guys a close-up of all the connectors, we have the USB-C, USB-A. Going down to the bottom, we have our front panel connector, followed by the adjustable RGB and the fan header that connects to the fan hub, and finally the HD audio, which is all the way on the bottom left. All right, guys, we're now ready to install some fans on the bottom of this case. Now, this case supports up to 3 120mm fans that can be installed right on top of here. However, we do have to remove these bracket pieces out of the way in order to install these fans. Another thing to know is that if you are going to install fans on the top, just like this, keep in mind that you can only horizontally mount your GPU. If you want to vertically mount your GPU, this case does support it by simply just rotating this express slot on the other side, installing a riser cable, and doing a vertical GPU mount instead, which I'll show you guys exactly how to do as well. But keep in mind, with the vertical GPU mount, we no longer have the ability to attach fans right on the top. Instead though, Lian Li does give the option of installing fans on the bottom. We won't be able to do 3 because the PSU will be installed in this section over here, but we can have 2 fans on the bottom to intake cold air to pass through. And again, that's completely optional. You can skip ahead for the vertical GPU mount instead if you want to go for that direction. Either or works. So first things first, we're going to remove these brackets. There are Phillips screws that are holding them in place. All right, 3 screws holds this right piece. So this whole thing comes right off. And if you don't mount any fans, you can also attach SSDs on this bracket as well, which is really cool. All right, and the last one is going to be this section over here. All right, 2 screws holds the left side. And keep in mind that this piece we are going to be needing if we're going to go the vertical GPU mount route, which I'll show you guys later on. So with those 2 brackets out of the way, we now have all of our mounting holes to attach our bottom fans. Now, if you notice, you don't have your traditional case fan screws, since you actually don't use that in this case. Instead, you're going to be using these type of screws over here. Now, inside the accessory toolkit, you're going to have a lot of these screws that look very similar. You're going to have one that are very thin, and you're going to have these that are the thickest. So make sure you grab the thickest one. Now, once you locate the thickest one, there are actually 2 sizes. One is longer and one is shorter. The longer screw are for thick fans. So any fans that are about 28mm thick, you want to use the larger screw. For 25mm fans, which are usually just a standard size, the SL Infinities, for example, will be 25mm, we're going to be using the shorter end. Now, keep in mind, if you're going to be using the SL Wireless Infinity fans, I recommend using the longer one instead. And I'll show you guys exactly why you want to use the longer one. You're also going to locate this rubber piece over here, and it's going to be the larger one because they do include a lot of smaller ones, but these are for SSDs instead. So we want to make sure we use the thicker one. All right, so once you have your screw, you want to locate your rubber piece and insert the screw into the small hole opening. Not this way where the larger one is. You want to do it with the smaller side, and you want to push that all the way in to the base. And you want to make sure it looks just like this. Now, to install this is pretty simple. You're going to screw it in the corner behind the fan, of course. You want to screw that in until it is flush. Okay, just like that. And the reason why I want to go with the longer one, this is the longer one, is because of these corner pieces that can make the shorter end a little bit difficult. So for example, if I try to screw this in, you'll notice that this starts to cave in. And you could just twist it just once and it'll work fine, but it's not going to be as tight as this one, which is more screwed inward. So I do recommend using the longer ones, specifically for the wireless fans. If you just have standard 25mm fans, go with the shorter one, of course. But for the wireless fans, I'm going to be using the longer screw instead. Alright, so now that we have all the screws on each of the corner of this fan, in order to install it, you just need to line up the screws with the larger opening first. So for example, I'm gonna use the middle for example. I wanna position this high up, and then I can just slide it downward, and now that fan is installed, which makes things very convenient. And I can easily just push this up and lift this whole fan out of the way, making it very easy to remove in the future. Now I'll show you guys exactly how to install the vertical mount routes, but just to quickly show you how easy it is, I can easily just do the same exact method and position the fan from the bottom and then slide it inward. And that's how you can install the fan on the bottom. Of course, you gotta make sure you have the correct orientation. So make sure you follow my vertical GPU mount route, where I install these fans on the bottom instead. And so now that we know how this mechanism works, since we're using the wireless SL Infinity fans, as you know, these fans are very popular because they feature a very easy way to install by having a nice interlocking daisy chain system here, where you can easily interlock them to create a chain of fans. So for example, we have two fans daisy chained together, and then taking the fan that I just screwed in, go ahead and locate the tabs. You're going to put that in, and then you just easily interlock them. And now we have three fans that are interlocked, and they share one single cable or receiver, making the installation process so much easier. Now, if you're using the wireless fans, make sure, of course, to remove all these corner tab pieces from the back of these wireless fans. And they're very easy to do. You just take a corner piece and you remove the tab out to reveal the case fan screws. You only need to do that on the back. Another thing to note is that since these are bottom fans and we want to make sure we're intaking air from the bottom, you want to make sure you pick up reverse blades. And these reverse blades come in either a single pack or a 3-pack. I recommend getting a 3-pack if you can, because that includes the L wireless controller that you are going to need to have everything wirelessly sync up. So make sure you guys are grabbing the reverse blade so you can see the beautiful infinity mirror on the front. So now I'm going to remove all the corner tab pieces, and I'll be adding all the screws on each corner of the fan. All right, I finally have all of the screws installed. It is a lengthy process to individually attach all the rubber pieces, but the upside is that it becomes very easy to just simply install it on the bottom. The last thing you need to know about the wireless Infinity fans is that you have two Infinity mirror designs on each side of the fan. This one's going to be your tapered design, and on the other side, we have our rectangular design. So it's completely up to you to decide which design that you want to do, of course. And so for the bottom fans, I'm going to go for the rectangular design. And before we proceed, we're going to make sure we decide on exactly where we want to attach our L wireless receiver, because this receiver can go in either direction, either on this side or on this side. Now keep in mind that since the fan is sitting very close to the express slot, we're not going to be able to attach this receiver on the left side. So we have to attach it on this side. So once we know that, all we have to do is just line this piece up. I'm gonna push that in and push it to the right to lock it in place. The next thing we have to take a look at is the direction of the actual cable. And because I chose this rectangular design, the cable is gonna be going in this direction. I have to position this cable on the other side so it can route cleanly. And so in order to do that, all we have to do is take this top tab completely off. It's very easy to do, just snap it right out. And then you can pull this cable right out and switch the orientation, pull it to the other direction, and then you can reposition this cable inside into this small opening here. Okay, just like that. And then we can easily reattach the top piece and click it back in. All right, and before installing our bottom fans, this will be a perfect opportunity to install this 4-pin PWM connector directly to the motherboard. Now, in the case of these wireless Infinity fans, you're gonna notice two of these 4-pin connectors. One of them is going to be your main PWM connector, while the other end is going to be what Lian Li refers to as a tail end. The easiest way you can tell is if you flip them around, you'll notice the silver trims. And so the main one is going to have 4 pins, while the tail end or the supplementary power is just going to have 2 pins. And so you want to make sure you connect this portion directly to the motherboard, or you can use a separate powered fan hub if you choose to, and we'll connect the tail end to the SATA power connector, which is included in the 3-pack, which is why I recommend getting the 3-pack. So for now, go ahead and locate this connector over here, the one that has the 4 pins, very easy to tell. And we're going to install that in any of these open fan headers. So remember, I have one right here, I have one over here as well, and I have one over here right next to the front panel connector. So I can choose exactly where I want to install it. So I'm going to choose to route this cable to the front of the case, so this opening over here for now. And so me personally, I'm just going to install that fan header right on the middle, which is this one over here. So I'm going to pass this in this channel over here, and we're going to connect that right here. And once again, you can use any fan header on your motherboard. All right, so that's connected. And now let's go ahead and take our fans. And one last thing here, the anti-GPU sag bracket can make it difficult to install. So make sure you unscrew the other end on the other side so you can lift this up. Just put it any position for now to give you the most clearance. And actually, another thing that I forgot to mention here, you want to make sure you remove this to give the most clearance. So these are very easy to remove. You just rotate them to the left, and this whole piece comes right off. So once again, you just turn this and then it comes right out. Now that we have those two tabs out of the way, the last thing that's included on your wireless fans is this lock and key. And that basically is going to block these pins that Lian Li does recommend you install. And so this tab goes right in just like this. You push it in and push it to the right. And now those pins are completely blocked. So you don't have to worry about any type of interference that may happen. And so now that we have these tabs out of the way, you should have no issues with any type of clearances. So go ahead and push all these down and pull it forward. And finally, we have our 3 fans perfectly installed with no type of issues with the express slots. And you'll see the actual key is pressed against the express slot, but no worries here because those pins are protected. Now for the rear fan, thankfully Lian Li includes this pre-installed 140mm fan, which also features an infinity mirror right in the middle, which also has RGB, and that basically matches the front fans here as well with the infinity mirrors right in the center, which I think look really good. Another thing I like too is that these fans are very white, so it matches the white inside the case, whereas the SL Infinities have more of a silver look to it. So for those reasons, I'm actually going to keep the rear fan. Now you could replace this with a smaller 120mm fan or another 140mm if you wanted to. You just have to remove the 4 screws, of course, and attach whichever other fan you want. But thankfully, again, it's pre-installed, so everything is wired perfectly. So I'm going to leave the rear fans just the way they are, but again, you can switch them if you want to. And so the next major component we're going to install is going to be our AIO, which is going to be right on top. The great thing about this case is that this top bracket is removable. So you can notice these 2 screws right over here. So that comes off with a Phillips screw. And with those 2 screws out of the way, we can just pull this top bracket all the way up and lift it away from the case. So that way we can install the AIO directly to the actual bracket, making the whole installation easier and smoother. So now we're ready to prepare our AIO. So the AIO that I'm going to be using in this build is going to be the new Hydroshift 2 LCD-S, which features a larger LCD screen versus the LCD-C version, which the screen is a little bit smaller and is also circular. This one has a square design, so I'm really excited to see how this is going to look on this build. Now, another thing to note about the Hydroshift 2, this one comes with 3 TL fans, but they also have different versions as well, similar to the LCD-C, which should come with a non-RGB, and hopefully also include one without fans at all. I'm not sure if they're going to include the SL Infinity fans on the Hydroshift 2. I hope they do though, but since we have SL Infinity fans on the bottom, I'm also going to utilize the SL Infinity fans on the top as well. So whichever AIO that you're going to go for, if you want to go for the SL Infinity wireless fans, make sure you pick up standard blades, since these are going to be on the top of the case. You want to make sure that's exhausting hot air out. So I'm going to leave this right on the side for now. And we're going to go ahead and grab the AIO out of the box. So we're definitely going to need the radiator, of course, with the pump attached. Another thing I recommend pulling out is this accessory box. And finally, depending on which CPU you're going to go for, it includes sockets for both Intel CPUs and AMD as well. So since we're using AMD, of course, we're going to be using this box. So I'll be putting this away. And as you guys can see, these wireless TL fans are already pre-installed on the Hydroshift 2. They actually even go a step further by installing the wireless receiver as well. However, since we're going to be replacing these fans with the Infinity fan, we need to obviously remove these fans. So the first thing I'm going to do is remove all of these corner tab pieces. which are then going to reveal your radiator screws, and you're going to unscrew each one of these. With all the screws out of the way, we can remove these TL fans out of the way. We then want to grab our wireless infinity fans, and we're going to also remove the corner tab pieces from the top as well as on the back. Now that I have the corner tabs removed from the top and the bottom, the next thing we have to do here is decide which one of these patterns we want to go for, whether it's the taper design or the rectangular design. On the bottoms, I went with the rectangular, but this time I'm going to go for the taper design. And pay attention to the positioning of these tubes, which is basically the back of the radiator. So if I want to do the taper design, for example, I want to make sure the taper design faces in the opposite direction of these tubes. So that way, when I install the AIO, the taper design shows. If you're going to go for the rectangular pattern, make sure you remove these tab pieces because they may not fit when you try to screw them in. So make sure you remove these if you're going to go for that. But the taper design, I don't have any tabs on the opposite side, so I'm pretty good with that. The next thing I want to do is I want to make sure I cover up the pins on the side that's going to be close to the radiator. So I'm going to add this lock real quick, just so that these pins are perfectly protected just in case. And we're going to install the L wireless receiver on this side. That's going to be this one over here. Push that in, push it to the left. All right, and the final thing here is that the direction of this cable is facing the opposite direction of where these tubes are. So I want to make sure the cables are going from that side, so that way these cables are perfectly hidden. So like I showed you earlier, these tabs could be removed and repositioned. Put the top piece back again. And now we can position the fans over the screw holes, and then go ahead and grab the radiator screws and screw them back in. Next thing we're going to do is reattach the tabs for the top, so that way we can cover up all of the screws. All corner tabs are now installed, and the next thing here is we're going to grab our top bracket that we removed earlier. We want to flip our AIO upside down, and then with your top bracket, these tabs over here align in the back of the case, of course, so this is going to be the correct orientation here. And so you can place the top bracket right on top. And then you want to go ahead and locate your accessory box. And further inside the accessory box, they're going to give you the additional corner pieces on the TL fans that we just removed. They're going to give you these two black thumb screws. They give you an L wireless controller, which is really nice. 2 sets of tube organizers. The screws for our AIO pump, which we're definitely going to need. A SATA to 3-way supplementary power for your Lian Li wireless fans. And I absolutely love the fact that they include this with the Hydroshift, because we're definitely going to be using this cable to provide supplementary power to the top fans and the bottom fans as well, which this cable only comes in a 3-pack of the wireless fans, but the fact that they include it on the Hydroshift is really awesome as well. And finally, they give you a small tube of some thermal paste with a spreader, because the actual pump itself does not have any type of pre-installed thermal paste, so we are going to have to install the thermal paste on the CPU, but I'll show you guys exactly how to do that. For now, we're just going to focus on our radiator screws. And so once you're ready, go ahead and start lining up the mounting screw holes. So I'm personally going to pre-screw one little screw on the bottom left corner, position the top bracket more towards the left side, just like this. And then you can go ahead and screw the rest. All right, so now that I have all the screws installed, it is now bolted onto the top bracket. The next thing I recommend you guys do is undo any of these wires. And so now you're ready to install this on our case. Before we mount the Hydroshift AIO, because of its hidden tube design that goes on the back of the actual radiator, the pump is going to sit on top of here, which will make it uncomfortable to remove these pieces and install the other bracket. So we're going to remove that first before we start placing this on top of the case. Now go ahead and lay down your case flat just like this. And we're going to remove these 2 pieces over here. And again, it's going to completely depend on your AIO, but most AIOs, you do end up removing these. So follow the manual on whatever AIO that you're going to specifically use. But since we're using the Hydroshift, then we do have to remove these. All right, now that we have these 4 screws, then these 2 pieces come out very easily. Next up, you're going to locate whichever CPU you're using. Since we're using AMD, we're going to go for the AMD box. And inside, we're going to find our bracket for our pump. So you're going to have a set of 4 screws that we are going to screw in. And then you have these 2 separate brackets. And right in the middle, it says CPU with the arrow pointing exactly where your CPU should be. So of course, with this one facing downward, I want to make sure that we have this on the top, whereas the one facing upward is going to be on the bottom. So all we have to do is line it up right on top of the screw holes here. And so that's the top, and this one's the bottom. We're going to open up these 4 screws and screw them right in. Now that we have our Hydroshift bracket installed, we can now lift up our case and install the top bracket for our AIO. All right, so next thing here is you're gonna grab your AIO with the top bracket already installed. You're gonna start feeding these wires on the right side, and you can feed it in these open channels. For the cable on the left, I'm gonna feed it on this open as well. So for the right one, we're going to push these cables on this side, and I'm gonna grab it from the other side. For the cables on the left, we're gonna grab, and we're gonna put it in this opening over here. We'll do the same thing here. I'm gonna grab it from the other opposite side, pull it through, start lifting this up so you can get a little bit closer. All right, now that we have most of the cables pushed in, the next thing you want to do, of course, is with the tabs, you want to angle it, put the 3 tabs and the 3 openings on top of the case. Be careful with this pump here because it could, fly. So just be very gentle when you're positioning the top bracket. Once you have these 3 tabs on top of the openings, you can start dropping this down gently. And so the screws should line up again. Go ahead and locate those 2 screws that we removed earlier for the top bracket. And we're going to screw that right in. All right, perfectly. We got those 2 screws back in. And now we have our AIO mounted on top. The next thing we want to do is lay the case flat down. So keep an eye on the actual pump. And again, depending on the AIO that you have, if you have one that has loose pumps, make sure you position the pump closer to the back of the case so that as you're dropping it, it's already against something here, so that way it doesn't fly out. So be very gentle when you're dropping the case. All right, so the next step is installing our AIO pump directly on top of our CPU. So the first thing we have to do is remove this plastic piece. And the easiest way to do that is grabbing the actual pump itself and removing it just like that. It should come out very smoothly. This is the actual LCD screen, so we're gonna reattach that later. So the next step here is installing our thermal paste directly on our CPU because this does not come with pre-installed thermal paste on the actual block itself. So Lian Li does give you thermal paste, or you can use your own favorite thermal paste, whichever one you want to use. Now they do give you a spatula as well if you want to spread the thermal paste evenly across the CPU, or you can simply just apply a pea-sized amount or draw an X on the center of the CPU, whichever one you're comfortable with. I'm going to go with the X method. So go ahead and unscrew the cap, pick the block up away from the CPU, and I'm going to draw a small X. Place the block very carefully whenever you need to have free hands. Make sure you cap your thermal paste right away. Make sure you remove this before installing it. So we're going to do that right now. Now pay attention to the middle of this bracket. You're going to see these 2 tabs on each opposite side, and those tabs are going to line up to this opening over here from the bottom and top of the bracket itself. You basically line it up and then you slide it to the left. So the way that looks is you're going to grab your pump, flip it over. Don't be afraid to put some force here because these tubes are really tight. And the bottom and the top, we're going to line it up to the opening on the right. So just like this, go ahead and push it down and then slide it to the left, just like that. And it should automatically align itself with the 4 screw holes on the actual bracket itself. And then go ahead and grab these thumb screws and we can now screw it on each of these corners. All right, now that we have all 4 screws locked into place, we can now grab the top cover of our LCD screen and then we can reattach that real quick. So it should slide in just the same way we removed it. You want to make sure, of course, you locate the openings for the tube fitment. And that slid in perfectly. You do have the option of installing this tube organizer if you want to, and basically organize the tube itself. However, it's not really needed since the path is so close. So I'm really content with how everything looks so far because those hidden tubes really make this build look even cleaner. So now we're ready to connect the pump header connector. But first, let's go ahead and lift up our case since we are going to have to reroute them. So lift up the case. Now that we're behind the case again, these are the cables you should be seeing on the back of the case. If you're utilizing the Hydroshift, on this side are the cables that control the actual pump on our Hydroshift 2. And that's going to include an internal USB header and 2 4-pin PWM that actually powers the actual pump. And what's really unique about the new Hydroshift is that they also include that tail end in the same exact way the SL Infinity fans have a 4-pin and a 2-pin tail. So I'm really happy to see that, since you're going to have more stable power. Now the one that we're going to connect to the motherboard, I'm going to kind of like separate it a little bit more, is going to be this one over here. And you can easily tell because this has like those 4 silver pins, whereas the other one here only has 2. And so that's how you can tell that this is the main one that's going to be connected to the actual AIO pump header. So with that in mind, so our AIO pump header is going to be right on top of the motherboard on the left side. And thankfully, because this supports back connect motherboard, I can squeeze this pump header right in this little opening over here and pass that along. And we're going to connect that when that time comes. The tail end supplementary power, I'm going to separate this even more because this I'm going to connect later. So I'm going to remove it like that. So we're just only going to focus on the main one. And then the internal USB, we're going to connect that to a USB header on our motherboard, which are normally located on the bottom of the motherboard, which you normally get 2 open USB headers. Any AIO with an LCD screen is going to have this internal USB. So you can go ahead and pass that right over here, right on the bottom, and we'll connect the USB. And then next, we have our SL Infinity wireless fans. And whether you kept the TL fans, it's the same exact thing. You're going to locate the main PWM, which has that 4 silver trims. And this one, because of the length, I'm just going to connect it to an open fan header on the bottom of the motherboard. You could also put it on the top if you really wanted to. It's completely up to you. I'm just going to route it on the bottom because we have these nice channels that make the cable management easier. So I'm going to pass this on the bottom here, and we'll connect that to an open fan header. All right, so now let's rotate our case. All right, and that AIO pump header that we just passed through is going to be this connector right over here. And on your motherboard, you want to locate your AIO pump header, which should normally be on the top right. Some motherboards might have them on the right side. And so the AIO pump header on this motherboard is going to be this one over here. And each one of these have like a rubber piece blocking the actual connector. So go ahead and remove them. So once I remove it, it's going to reveal the pins for our AIO pump header. If for whatever reason your motherboard does not have an AIO pump header, you could connect it to CPU fan if you wanted to. And so similar to the other fan headers, we just have to line up the pins with the tab itself. And we're going to connect that to our AIO pump header. And again, reference your motherboard's manual, so that way you have more details of where your AIO pump header is. All right, so now that is connected. And so the next thing here is connecting our top SL Infinity wireless fans and the internal USB, which are located right on the bottom of the motherboard. Now there is space to connect it, but it is going to be a little bit difficult since you don't have a ton of free space. Thankfully, because we already have the bottom fans with those special screws, we can easily just push this upwards and momentarily remove these fans out of the way so that we have access to all of our bottom connectors. So since we just installed the AIO pump header, next I'm going to install the internal USB, and that's going to go on an open USB header on your motherboard. And so the internal USB has 9 pins with 1 missing, so make sure you line that up. And I'm actually going to move this cable on this side over here because the USB is right there. I'm going to connect that right there. All right, so I have the internal USB connected right over there. And then we have our 4-pin header for the top wireless fans. And I'm going to connect that right over here, right next to the HD audio, because I have an open fan header over there. So I'm going to connect that right there. All that is connected, and we can easily place our bottom fans back in place without the need of unscrewing anything. So I really like this mechanism here. Make sure you pull it towards you. And now we have our AIO pump header installed, as well as the internal USB for the LCD screen and the additional fan header for our top fans. Next component we're setting up is the power supply. Now the footage you're seeing right now is from my previous LANCOOL 217 build, but they do share the same exact PSU mounting options, so we can still follow along. Now the great thing about the LANCOOL 217 is that we actually have 2 ways of mounting our PSU. Now I have the case front facing to show you that by default, we have this opening over here to actually install our PSU here, or you also have the traditional way of mounting the PSU. By removing these 4 screws, you can attach your PSU traditionally this way, so you can have the power connector located on here. But as you'll notice on the bottom left, you have another AC input here, and that is because on the inside of the case, and we have an AC power extender that basically routes the connector if the PSU is facing that way. And the great thing about that is that when you have the PSU installed with the input facing the opposite side, you now have all of the cables facing in the front, making it easier to cable manage. The other way, having this traditionally to the right, now you have the PC cables on the left side, making cable management a little bit more difficult. So I like the fact that Lian Li gives you both options, and this is the option that I'm going to go for to take advantage of this right angle AC power adapter. Go ahead and grab your PSU, make sure your fan is on the bottom, make sure the AC inputs is facing that way, and then you can easily slide the PSU in all the way in. And now I'm going to flip it over so I can show you exactly what it looks like. So we have the PSU over here, so go ahead and guide it right where the mounting holes are at. And you should have a total of 4 screws that you can easily mount with PSU screws. So I'm going to take the PSU mounting screws. You can find these in your PSU accessory kit or in the accessory kit of the Lian Li. I'm using the one that came with the Lian Li. And we're just going to screw all 4 in. All right, now all 4 screws are in, and then we're going to take this extender here, and then you just slide that right in. And now we have the AC plug perfectly routed. Now the only downside of having it this way is that once you have the mesh panel cover over, you don't easily have access to these switches here. Just keep that in mind that if you're gonna have the PSU routed this way, you are gonna have to remove the mesh panel so that you can easily have access to these buttons. Or if you have, let's say, a smart fan control button here, just keep that in mind. But now that we know that right angle that I showed you now is located on the back, which is perfect. So now we're ready to install our power supply unit cable. And just a reminder, if your connectors are going to be facing this side of the case, I do recommend connecting your power supply unit cables first to make it a little bit easier for you. But if you have your connectors facing towards you, then we can tackle each cable individually. All right, so for the first PSU cables that we're going to connect is going to be our CPU power connectors. The easiest way to identify is to make sure it says CPU on each side of this cable. And on the opposite side, it should say PSU, letting you know exactly where each one goes. So PSU, of course, is going to be connected on the PSU, and CPU is going to be on the top. And so on your PSU, you want to locate where your CPU power connectors are. A lot of times the CPU and PCIe connectors are shared. And so in this PSU, for example, I have 6 8-pins over here, which could be used for both CPU and PCIe. So I can literally connect it anywhere. So I'm just going to connect the PSU end all the way on the right side. Because all the connectors are facing towards us, we can easily just push it in without having to dig ourselves in to this side, making it very convenient. So both CPU power connectors are in, and our CPU power are normally located right on the top right. I'm going to go ahead and pass it through on this little open channel, and you want to position your cable downward since the AIO and the fans might make it a little bit difficult to sneak in, but I'll show you what to do just in case. I'm going to grab the second set, and I'm also going to pass it in the same channel. Next, we're going to rotate the case. All right, and there's our CPU power connectors. And even though we have the AIO and the fans installed, we still have space to connect everything. The ROG STRIX BA50A uses 2 8-pin connectors. So we're going to easily connect that. We want to make sure the tab is facing upwards when you're bending it. So when I bend it this way, the tab is going to be facing upwards. So I'm just going to bend and connect the right side. Here, a nice little click. So that first one is in. We want to make sure the tab is facing upwards when it's bent, and you'll notice that it's on the bottom. So I'm going to have to rotate it again, pass it through again. You can still grab the CPU cable. There's definitely plenty of space. Now when I bend it, the tab is facing upwards, and we're going to connect that right in. All right, and now I'm going to pull the cable inward. Now our CPU power connector is connected. Let's go ahead and rotate the case again. And so we'll see our CPU power connector here. And we're going to use this little raceway over here so we can tuck the cables. All right, so the next power cable that we're going to connect is going to be our ATX motherboard power connector here. And it's very easy to identify because it is the one with the largest connector that splits off into these 2 separate connectors. And for this one specifically, I want to rotate the case first because I want to connect it on the motherboard first. Now, if you're just going to use the PSU cable, all you have to do is have the tab on the right side and connect it to this large connector over here. And so you would just connect that just like this, and then you can pass all of this cable into this grommet opening over here. However, I'll be using the Lian Li wireless strimmers. And if you want to use this, by default, they come with a black clip, but they do include the white clip as well that you can easily remove and replace. Very easy to do. And so since I'll be using the strimmer cables instead, I'm going to connect this to the motherboard first. Then I'm going to bend this into this grommet. And then we're going to rotate the case. And now we'll see the other end of the streamer cable or your power supply unit cable where you can easily just connect. So since we're using the streamer, I'm going to connect the larger end to the back of the streamer. Okay, now that that's connected, the other end, we're going to connect it to our power supply unit. It's going to be these two connectors, starting with the big one. Goes in nice and smooth. All right, now both of these are now connected. All right, so now that we have the ATX power installed, the next thing here is to grab the bulk of this cable. I'm going to loop it with these two straps here. Actually, this third one too. All right, so I was able to loop the majority of the cable using these 3 Velcro straps and then a final little loop in the middle just so I can keep the streamer facing high, and then I have some extra maneuverability if I ever want to pull the Lian Li streamer more towards the inside or more outwards, so that way I can have it rested like this. If you're not going to be using streamer cables, you're more than welcome to manage it however you want, or you can put the majority of the cables here. All right, so the next power supply unit cable is going to be our SATA power connectors, and your PSU might give you different styles of SATA cables, and so you can choose whichever one that you want. And so on this case, we do have this fan hub that needs to have SATA power, which is located right over here. So you are going to need to use this regardless if you want to be able to power the included pre-installed fan, especially the one in the front, of course. But we're also going to be using this SATA to 3-way splitter that's included in either the Hydroshift 2 or in a 3-pack of any of the wireless fans that we're going to use to provide supplementary power to our SL Infinity fans, as well as our Hydroshift 2. So our SATA power connector has 6 pins. On your PSU, you're going to locate where it says peripheral or SATA, so I can put them anywhere. I'm going to put them facing upwards, maybe like right in the middle. And I really like this style of SATA connectors because they're basically facing kind of upwards, which I think is really nice. Will make it much easier to cable manage. And so we're going to first start off with this SATA power over here, which I'm going to extend real quick. And we're just going to connect it with one of the available SATA powers, which is right over here. Okay, so now our fan hub is powered. The next thing I'm going to grab is this SATA to 3-way. We're going to connect that to another open slot, just like that. And this 3-way have 2 pins each. And so these are used to connect the tail end of the Hydroshift and the Infinity fans that we installed earlier. So starting off with your bottom SL Infinity fans, that extra tail end is right over here and it only has 2 pins. And so I'm going to use one for our bottom fans. Make sure you just match up the tab. So that's connecting, giving us supplementary power. Our next wireless fans are going to be this one over here, and this was for our top fans that are attached on our AIO. Once again, I'm going to grab one end and we're going to connect that real quick. Now both of our Infinity fans now have supplementary power, and I can start tucking this in to the corner. And our final one is going to be this one over here, and this was for our Hydroshift LCD-S, and that's going to be our final connector. I'm going to connect that in. Perfect. Now our Hydroshift has that supplementary power, which is very critical to ensure that everything runs smoothly. And so now these cables, I'm going to use these Velcro straps to manage everything. All right, and after a couple of minutes, I did a very mild cable management. I really love the fact that they have so many Velcro straps all around in this corner tab pieces, really make it effortlessly to cable manage. Now this is probably not going to be the best cable management, but I'm perfectly content with the way it is. And so now we're going to move on. So we're going to rotate the case. All right, so the next major component that we're going to install is going to be our L wireless controller. And this is what allows to connect all of Lian Li's wireless ecosystem using this one simple controller, which can accept 10 separate wireless channels. The great thing about this case is that the fan hub that's included in the back of the case is also compatible with this L wireless controller, which allows everything to be controlled by the L Connect software, which is awesome. Now there's multiple ways you can get the L wireless controller. They do come whenever you get a 3-pack of any wireless fans. You can pick one up individually, or even the Hydroshift also includes a controller. The only difference between the two here is that the one that comes with the Hydroshift only allows for USB, while the standard L wireless controller gives you the same USB method, but it took it a step further by giving you optional connector using this cable over here that has an internal USB header, which allows you to put this controller inside the case instead of having to plug this in on the back of the motherboard. It's completely up to you if you want to use the USB method or the internal one, I personally prefer the internal USB. That way you don't see the wireless controller sticking in the back of the PC. Personal preference, and the only internal USB that we've used so far is the one that connects the LCD screen of this Hydroshift. So we actually have one additional internal USB. In order for us to gain access again to the internal USB header, of course, we're going to push the fans back, and we're going to temporarily remove the fans just to give us some clear space. I'm going to grab the L wireless controller, and we're going to connect this on the back. Just like that. And to make things very clean, I'm just going to temporarily put the controller inside the case real quick, just so I can pass the wires inside this small little opening over here. All right, and I'm going to go ahead and connect the internal USB header right over here. Okay, and that's our last USB header on our motherboard. So we're completely maxed out. And finally, the optional fan header. I'm just going to connect that right over there since that's an open fan header that I have. And I'm just going to connect that right over there. And so let me just move the fans here. We have the controller right here on the bottom of the case for now. I'm just going to pull these cables. And once you're ready, go ahead and reattach your fans, because that's pretty much all we need. Push it forward again. And now that's locked in. All right, guys, for our final components, it's going to be, of course, our graphics card. And the one I'm going for is going to be this beautiful ROG Astral 5080, and this has to be one of the best looking all white graphics cards. I mean, this thing is beautiful. And so in order for us to install our GPU, I'm going to first do it horizontally, and then I'll show you guys how to do it vertically as well. Now, before we proceed, because this Astral is super thick, let me leave this right over here. We're going to move this anti-GPU sag bracket that we moved up temporarily when we installed the bottom SL Infinity fan. So go ahead and undo the screw a little bit on the back and just drag this all the way down for now, and we'll readjust it once we have our graphics card installed. The next thing we have to do is to remove these express lock covers. So these are very easy to remove. They just take Phillips screws. So you just have to unscrew each one. Once you remove the screw, they're very easy to just remove, and then you can just place it to the side. All right, so only remove the second and third slot. And once you're ready, go ahead and grab your GPU. You want to make sure you line up this notch with the notch of your main express slot. And I recommend going in nice and slow. And once you get close enough, you can go ahead and push it in. All right, once you have it installed, if you want to, you can go ahead and reach for the anti-GPU sag bracket here, and you can quickly just lift up as much as you can, just to kind of aid. You want to go ahead and grab the screw, so you can at least screw in the middle screw to hold most of the weight. I'm going to screw in the final screw. All right, now I'm going to reposition the anti-GPU sag bracket, which I'm going to put you guys a little bit more down. All right, and this is the anti-sag bracket that's integrated on the case. So go ahead and lift it up, and you want to make sure your graphics card is leveled. Tighten the screw. It does have like a thumb grip, and I'll show you exactly how it looks like in the back. All right, and this is what it looks like behind. And I'm just going to lift this up a little bit more, and then I'm going to tighten it. And you can always come back here and readjust. All right, and after readjusting the bracket, we now have a nice, perfect level. And it's one of the best features of this case because it prevents from having to use a separate anti-GPU sag bracket that you might have to stick over here to ensure that your GPU is leveled. So I really like the fact that this comes with that anti-sag bracket. Now the GPU connector that my ROG Astral uses is going to be the 12-volt high power connector. If your GPU does not use this type of connector, then it's definitely going to be using the standard PCIe connector that your PSU also has. Now to really add some additional flair, I'll be using the Lian Li Wireless GPU Strimer extension cable, just like how I have it on the motherboard as well. Now this Strimer cable by default comes with this right angle adapter, but you could actually swap out the right angle adapter with a straight adapter instead. It is included in the box, and they also have it in black and white. Since we're going for white, I already swapped out the clip to the white clip. And it's completely up to you how you want to route your Strimer cables. So you can have it go from the bottom like this if you wanted to. I personally like to have kind of like a waterfall effect from top to bottom, overlapping the motherboard Strimer cable. There is an additional grommet over here if you wanted to route the Strimer cable like this if you wanted to. Again, there's so many different ways that you could pick and choose how you want to route it. But for now, I'm just going to route it like this and have that nice little waterfall effect. And so once you're ready, go ahead and connect it to your GPU power connector. For whatever reason, if the connector is flipped, you could always remove the clips of your Strimer, rotate it to accommodate whichever connector you have. Most GPUs, you shouldn't have to do that, but some GPUs are flipped, so you might have to flip this whole RGB cable. Now that we have that connected, I'm gonna go ahead and rotate the case. All right, now you should see the end of your GPU streamer, or you might see your power supply cable instead. Since these are extension cables, I'm gonna go ahead and connect one end of the 12-volt high power connector. So I'm gonna go ahead and connect it right over here. Make sure that's connected all the way through. And then to finally connect power supply unit, all of our connectors are facing forward, so it's very easy to just locate and connect. On this PSU is this connector right over here. So all we're gonna do is match the pins and connect that through. All right, now we have that connected. And the final thing here is to just cable manage everything. The great thing about this case, like I mentioned earlier, is that there's so many different type of raceways and Velcro straps that make it easier to cable manage. So I'm gonna take a few minutes to cable manage as best as I can. All right, and here is the final cable management. And before putting on the back panel, just inspect this hub on the top over here. Just make sure all these connectors are connected, because sometimes as you're installing your components and cable routing, some of these might come loose a little bit. So just make sure everything is nice and tidy. Just check every single connector just in case. You want to make sure everything is nice and connected. And now we're ready to assemble the case, starting off with the back panel, of course. So just gonna grab the back panel and we're just going to angle that in and be able to cover everything by just snapping it in place. All right, so everything stayed nice and flush on the back. All right, next is gonna be our top mesh panel. It's gonna go right on top. Just line everything up, snap it into place. All right, next up is the side bottom mesh panel here. That's gonna go right over here. Now, important thing to note here is if you have your PSU installed where the AC power connector is located on this side, make sure your PSU is set to off, connect the power connector to the back, and then you can flip the switch on to then put this bottom panel on, because to have access, you do have to remove the glass and the bottom panel. So just keep that in mind. We're gonna go ahead and easily place this back in. That slides in, and that thumb screw to the right. I'm sorry, to the left. All right, don't forget to remove any remaining plastics. All right, and finally our side glass panel. And then you can snap it in place. All right, guys, and there we have it. We have our PC fully built. Now I'm gonna put this on the corner of my desk so we can power it on. All right, guys, I have the case in the corner of my desk. Everything is finally built. Make sure, of course, you connect all your peripherals like your monitor, keyboard, mouse. If this is your first time installing Windows 11, you want to make sure you have a flash drive with Windows 11 installation toolkit so you can install Windows 11 on your SSD. I already have Windows 11 installed on this PC already with all the necessary software. So the power button is going to be located right on top in between the M1 and M2 button. Very simple. So we're going to fire it up. 3, 2. All right, guys, there we have the 217 Infinity fully powered on. And as you can see, it looks absolutely beautiful. We have the infinity mirrors right in the front, and it's very, very reflective. I'm really happy with how this turned out. I'm gonna go ahead and shut off my studio lights to get a better look of all the RGB effects. All right, now that I have my studio lighting off, we can get a better look at all of the infinity lighting, especially on the front of the case here. Definitely loving the infinity mirrors on the front. See the same infinity mirrors right on the center of these really large 170mm fans. And then we can take a closer look on the inside here. Now, one thing to note is that especially when it's dark and when you have RGB lighting, you are going to be able to see through the mesh bottom panel over here. You can see all the wirings that I have currently here. The great thing about this though is that you could always fill this up with whatever you want, maybe like a figurine, or add some extra stuff there to make it very, very unique. All right, guys, so having your GPU horizontally mounted on this case looks really good, especially when you can add 3 fans on the bottom. But if you want a completely different look and showcase the fan side of your GPU, then this case does have built-in support to easily vertically mount your GPU. Now, before I proceed, one important note about vertically mounting your GPU on this case is that you are going to have to purchase a separate GPU riser cable that's not included when you buy the case. So first thing I'm gonna do here is remove the GPU. Now that I have the GPU out of the way, the next thing we have to do here is remove the bottom fans, because we can't have these fans on the top like this. So I'm going to momentarily pull all 3 fans out. I'm also going to disconnect this receiver here momentarily. All right, and the next step is rotating the express slots to accommodate a vertical GPU. And so to do that, I'm going to rotate the case to show you what's behind. So this whole piece is held by 4 screws. Just go ahead and unscrew them. All right, now that we have all 4 screws out of the way, we can go ahead and pull this whole thing out. And now we can rotate it like this, making sure that all the screws are facing upward. And then we can realign it back into place. And now you'll be able to screw in 4 screws using the same exact screws you just removed. All right, and once you screw in all 4 screws, the next thing we have to do is reattach the original brackets that were originally on top of here before we horizontally mounted our GPU. And so there are these 2 pieces. You can easily just realign them and slide them back in. Now, before I screw in these bottom brackets, the amazing thing about this particular case is that even though we're going to vertically mount a GPU, we can still attach fans on the bottom. Now, if you choose not to install fans on the bottom, then you can screw in both of these brackets just like this, how it originally was, and you have all of the mounting screws that are needed to attach the standoff. However, since I want to add those 2 fans on the bottom, we do have to remove the right piece, which is a very large piece here. And further inside the accessory toolkit, you're gonna locate these 2 pieces. Starting with this one over here, we can easily attach this right over here, right next to the left bracket. So that slides in very easily. And you're gonna use the same screws that you used earlier to remove those brackets. And Lian Li does give you a lot of spare screws just in case you're missing them. But I'm gonna go ahead and screw in the original one. And now I'm going to screw in that new smaller bracket. And so it should look just like this. The final one that we have to attach is going to be this piece over here, because now the bottom fans are going to be shifted more towards the right. And so this piece, you want to locate this end over here. And there are literally 2 small openings right on the corner. And all you have to do is just angle it upwards a little bit and then slide it down. Make sure you line up the screw hole and go ahead and screw that in. And so now with the vertical GPU mount, because we have the PSU on this side, we of course cannot attach a fan where the PSU lives, but we can at least use 2 120mm fans. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to undo the top fan, remove it. And so now I'm left with 2 fans that are daisy chained. Now, since these are reverse bay fans, I want to make sure that this side of the fan is showing upwards. And we originally screwed in these pieces on the bottom, of course, whenever we wanted to have the fans on the top. But now we still want to have this side showing. So now we have to move all of these screws now on top. And so for the wireless infinity fans, remove all the tabs. And next, you're going to grab all of these screws, unscrew them, and you're going to screw them on top. All right, guys, I now have all the screws on top. And now we can do the same thing, but now position the fans to the bottom. You want to angle it a little bit here because we don't have a lot of space. I'm going to have to do this on the opposite side. All right, and while you have the fan in the bottom, make sure you reconnect your L wireless receiver. Now that we have it up, the same thing we did with the bottom fans, we just pull it towards us. And just like that, we now have the bottom fans in the lower position. The next thing you want to locate inside the accessory toolbox are these 2 standoff pieces. And also this tool over here that has a Phillips on the other end and it has a socket on the other end. That way we can screw that in. Now, the actual bracket itself has 2 screw mounts in each side of the bracket. We have 2 over here and another 2 over here. Or if you're using the original bracket, you'll see the 2 mounting screw holes over here as well. So it's going to be in the same position. And the reason why you have 2 is to accommodate 2 different positions. So you can have the riser cable more towards the back or the riser cable more towards the front. Depending on your thickness of your GPU, you might want to play around which side is going to be the best one. Since the ROG Astral is such a thick card, I might want to use the screw hole that's more towards the front. And so once you're ready, go ahead and start screwing it in. You can momentarily screw it in. And then to fully screw in the standoffs, we're going to use this tool. And you should now be able to screw in this standoff. All right, now that we have these 2 standoffs installed, the next thing is to grab your riser cable. And you should have openings on each side. And before I screw that in, it'd probably be easy to just plug in your riser cable directly to your motherboard first. So I'm going to do that real quick. All right, so that is in. And then we can go ahead and bend the cable inward. And I'm going to grab my screw, have it ready. All right, the riser cable is perfectly installed. Now the next thing here is to remove the express slots, but because of this rear fan, I actually cannot use the screwdriver here. All right, guys, so to give me the most space, I removed the rear fan. And for now, I use some shipping tape. That way I can have this fan out of the way. I don't want to have to remove the whole fan, of course, because it's going to be very, very difficult, of course. And so now I'm going to go ahead and re-grab the GPU. And without that rear fan, it's much easier to line up everything. All right, I was finally able to install the ROG Astral on the case. I already have one screwed in. With the rear fan out of the way, it's a lot easier for me to just screw it in like this. If you have a smaller screwdriver, then that's definitely going to help as well. And once it's screwed in, it should now hold in place. And now I'm going to just remove this tape and reinstall the rear fan. All right, and before I reassemble the case, the final thing to touch up on is going to be the potential for GPU sag. Now, this card is massive, so it does have a slight downward. So unfortunately, the anti-GPU sag bracket on this case is not long enough to lift up the GPU from the case. So in those type of instances, you would have to get yourself an anti-GPU sag bracket, something like a pillar style, for example. I'll link this in the bottom. That way you can probably attach it in the corner right over here. You could also attach it like right in the middle as well. I'm just going to attach it right on the corner over here. I just want to make sure that the GPU is not sagging. Even if the sag is very subtle, it's still present. So I'm going to see if I could just have it like this. All right, I'm just going to increase the height of the pillar real quick, just so I can find the perfect alignment. All right, and I think I found a good alignment over here. All right, and this is how it looks when it's vertically mounted. I did move this from the corner right over here since it was a little bit more stable. So I just easily moved it. And now we have a much better level. And I still love the fact that we still have the two SL Infinity fans on the bottom, which is also drawing in cold air from the bottom up. And you can still see the SL Infinity mirrors through the mesh, even when there's so much light. I'm going to dim down the studio lights real quick. All right, and with the lights off, of course, you can definitely see the infinity mirrors on the side, which still look incredible. And when you're looking at it from the top, you'll still be able to see the beautiful mirrored finish of the SL Infinity fan. So I really love the fact that Lian Li does give you both options of horizontal and vertical, but especially giving us the ability to at least have two fans instead of having no fans at all. So building in the LANCOOL 217 Infinity has been an awesome experience, and I think it looks better than the standard 217 with wood accents if you prefer having RGB fans. Now, for those that prefer having a pure all-white case, the darker front glass might be a turnoff compared to getting it in all black, where the tempered glass blends in more seamlessly, but I still think it looks awesome with that infinite RGB lighting. The standard 217 also included brackets to replace the two large fans and swap them out for three 120mm fans, but on the Infinity, you don't have those brackets, and honestly, it's not even needed since one of the biggest features of this case is the amount of airflow you get with those front fans, and since these fans have RGB, Infinity mirrors, and can be controlled with L-Connect, there's just really no need to change them. Now, you don't need to use L-Connect to control the RGB or fan curves, since this case has two M buttons next to the power button, which allows you to sync the RGB or fan curves to the motherboard, or you can even cycle through different RGB effects independently with those buttons. But if you do go with wireless fans or other Lian Li wireless devices, the L-Connect software makes it easy to connect everything in one place. For the price, you get a lot of value and customization options with this 217 Infinity case for only $130 for the white color or $125 for the black color. I think this case is perfect for those looking for a unique case with tons of airflow and space to make a fire gaming PC. I want to thank Lian Li for sending this case out to me so I can showcase and make this awesome build for you guys. All components will be listed down below, along with affiliate links that help and support my channel. And finally, I want to thank you and all of my followers who spend their time watching my videos. I value your time, so hopefully this guide helped you in your journey to create an awesome LANCOOL 217 Infinity gaming PC. I'll catch you guys on the next one. Firewolf out.